Shining has carved its own irreplaceable spot on the shelves of horror fans since its initial release over 35 years ago, and it continues to be a favorite film among both movie buffs and scholars alike. One of the film's greatest advocates, Tony Magistrale, author of Hollywood's Stephen King, cites the movie as the intellectual's horror film, and throughout the chapter of his book dedicated to the film, he praises The Shining for its amount of depth and insight into what terrifies audiences. So what makes this Stephen King novel turned horror film such a pillar of horror? Ghosts, malevolent spirits, and axe-wielding sociopaths can step aside, because the real reason The Shining terrifies audiences, even in today's world, is because it depicts the complete destruction of the 20th century nuclear family.
What do you want me to do about it?
Horror films are meant to evoke certain responses in us: fear, paranoia, and opposition to what we perceive as alien. Throughout time, the accessories and themes used to evoke such responses from audiences have and will continue to change as long as the film industry exists. In the 1970s, one of the greatest changes to the horror genre happened by changing where the evil came from. In the essay Slaughtering Genre Traditions, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre by Rick Werland, Werland talks about how the films like Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho and Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre forced the malevolent creatures from being external entities to being internal. They were no longer alien, they were regular family members. Werland goes on to say that thematically, Texas Chainsaw Massacre continued to identify the American family as the locus of monstrosity and terror, perhaps the most crucial and disturbing development of the genre in this time period. This tradition of internal conflict will continue on through the horror genre for the next several years, leading up to The Shining's release during the summer of 1980.
Where I was. Understand?
As the film opens up, it immediately sets up that the Torrance family is the standard American family. Jack Torrance is the aspiring writer, he's the breadwinner, and he's the husband and father. His wife Wendy devotes her time to Jack and their son Danny, and they appear to be normal puppets living in the bottled lives of the average family. Wendy intentionally attempts to deter conversations of controversy and constantly prefers to maintain normalcy even in basic conversation.
You mean they ate each other up?
They had to, in order to survive.
Jack, don't worry, Mom. I know all about cannibalism. I saw it on TV.
See? It's okay. You saw it on the television.
In Frank Mansell's essay, What About Jack?, Mansell makes the argument that Wendy's main goal is to be as close to the stereotypical family mother as possible. She's very quick to ignore problems or back off from them. She acts submissively to whatever the needs of the family are. Mansell also makes the point that Jack also attempts to fit this mold of a standard parent. He's forced into a position of providing for people he must love unconditionally. He also must live according to societal standards and restrictions set for family members and parents. Some of these standards to live by are talked about in Stephen Brum's essay, Nightmare on Sesame Street, in which Brum argues different rises to evil of children in film. Essentially, the argument that Brum provides is whether children turned evil in films are the result of external or internal factors. This argument plays on the fears that real-world parents face, as well as the fears the Torrance family faces in the film. They opt to live as close to the stereotypical family as possible with hopes that someday Danny will be a somewhat normal person as well. The real horror of the film starts with the Overlook Hotel. Whether the Overlook Hotel really does have supernatural qualities or it simply provides an isolated atmosphere that would drive weakened people to insanity is one of the greatest debates about the film. In Tony Magistrale's book, Hollywood's Stephen King, he makes light of the fact that every time Jack communicates with one of the spirits, he's in the company of a mirror. Magistrale says, furthermore, the fact that Jack looks into a mirror whenever he speaks to the hotel means to some extent that Kubrick implicates him directly into the hotel's consciousness, because Jack is, in effect, talking to himself. No matter what the opinion a person has on the Overlook's ability to influence a person, the hotel at least has a terrifying effect on the family, an effect that completely threatens the construct of the American nuclear family.
You are concerned about him.
Yes.
And are you concerned about me?
Of course I
For Wendy, that effect is that she gains more power in the family, something that defies the designated role that she has in the nuclear family. She is no longer just a stay-at-home mother, but now takes charge in the duties at the Overlook Hotel. Eventually, the effect that the hotel has had on Danny and Jack forces her to break from her role as a follower and make decisions on Danny's future. This challenges Jack's perceived patriarchal power, and the two finally clash over it. For Danny, the great nightmare that parents have about their children comes true, and the fact that outside forces seek to manipulate Danny, and the parents are powerless in helping prevent it because of the roles they've been placed into. What is even more terrifying is that in the end, it's both the internal and external figures putting the family at danger. It's only when the full effect of the hotel hits, and Wendy is freed from her strings as being the quiet, faithful wife that she finally takes charge and seeks to rescue herself and Danny from the situation.
Hi, Lloyd. A little slow tonight, isn't it?
In Frank Mansell's essay, he spends much time talking about the effect the hotel places on Jack. Mansell argues that the hotel feeds Jack's ego as the family's patriarch, and eventually that rise causes him to view Danny, and especially Wendy, not as family members, but property and scapegoats for Jack's own failures. Mansell explains that Jack's increased ego, coupled with the sense of ambition and failure that the hotel instills within him, ultimately pushes Jack over the edge, making him content with destroying his own family.
Here's Johnny!
At the end of the film, with Jack deceased and Wendy and Danny surviving, the film ultimately showcases one of the greatest fears people have, the destruction of family, and especially during the 20th century, the destruction of the 20th century values. While The Shining walks around with a mask that is a ghost story, in reality what makes the film so terrifying is the realization that family and relationships are so incredibly fragile and sacred.